Good afternoon. My name is Mensah. Thank you for joining today's webinar session organized by Innovare. Thank you for joining today's webinar session organized by Innovare. Big and small businesses have increased services in the digital space. Therefore, it has become necessary for these services to be protected. The main aim for today's webinar session is to build resilient and trusted communication services for an improved cybersecurity hygiene in the cyberspace where your organization operates. Normally, when I get the opportunity to do a presentation, I tell my audience to just pause and reflect on my next slide. I normally call that next slide food for thought seconds. So it's about you reflecting on this particular slide, which I call the food for thought seconds. When you look at this slide, it gives you a sneak preview of breaches that have occurred in organization from 2018 to 2020. Big organizations that have been breached. In addition, this slide creates two sets of emotions. The first emotion that this slide creates is someone that looks stressed. The second emotion that this slide creates is someone that looks calm. The person that looks stressed will say that when you look at the survey that was conducted, big organizations that were breached, I don't think that I can handle it. My company is too small. But the second person that looks calm says to himself, I have it under control. Take a drive with me and let's see how this second person exhibited the calm emotion. The first session that we'll be talking about is communication security objective. We'll be looking at risk assessment, directive policy, and also we'll be looking at classification of data and zones. Before any control is rolled out, you need to ensure that the control that you roll out is meeting its control objectives. So we want to build the resilient and its trusted communication services for improved cybersecurity hygiene in the cyberspace in which our organization operates. We need to have a control objective. What is the control objective? The control objective is to ensure that protection of information in the network, and it's also supporting processing facilities. This is key. A lot of people roll out controls, and the controls that they roll out is not meeting the control objective. The control objective that you ensure, the control objective that you define will ensure that once the control objectives are met, the business strategy objectives to is being met. Once the control objectives have been defined, then we have to think about something that we call risk management. I'm not going to delve more into risk management because Innovare will be organizing a webinar session on risk management, but I want to touch on something about risk management. For your risk management to be mature, or for you to have a mature risk management, first of all, you need to ensure that your risk management is something we call repeatable and also consistent. For the sake of what we want to achieve, for what we want to, for our communication security goal, we're trying to have a resilient and trusted communication services. Performing the risk assessment gives us the opportunity to define the risk acceptance criteria. So let me give a definition of risk assessment. Risk assessment, when we say risk assessment, what we mean is that is the combination of all the effort that you can think of so that you are able to identify and analyze the potential event. The key word is potential event. Because when we go to the other slide, you will find out the importance of that keyword, that potential event, that potential event that I just said. The key word is for you to identify a potential event that may impact. What is it going to impact? Is it going to impact an individual? Is it going to impact an asset? Or is it going to have an impact in the environment in which your organization operates? So like what I said, the key word is what? Potential event. Once you have your risk assessment defined, then you move on to the policy. I call it directive. Building cybersecurity program for organization, what I've realized is that a lot of people develop their policies before doing risk assessment. You want to build a resilient and trusted communication services. Your risk assessment should be performed first. Once you perform your risk assessment, you know the gaps, you know the areas in which you need to apply your controls. So I perform my risk assessment. I can see the areas that I need to apply my controls to reduce it to an acceptable level, in which a acceptable level defined during the risk assessment activity. So once you do the risk assessment, then you do policy. This process is so key. You need to perform your risk assessment before you start development of your policy. There's a saying that pictures speak louder than words. So let's look at some of the components of a policy. A policy should have, of course, should have introduction. Also, it should have an objective. Management commitment statement, it should have a scope defined. Then it should have something called disciplinary statement. I call it a deterrent control, because every control that you apply in your environment has a control usage. It can be a directive, it can be a deterrent, it can be a detective, it can be a recovery. Then we have roles and responsibilities. Then we have policy requirement. These are the components that make up the policy development. Once you have your policy defined, you have to move to what I call the last activity, which is very key. It's the classification. You defining your classification scheme. The classification scheme that you define helps you to identify the asset that needs the required control based on the level of importance of that particular asset in your organization. So you need to classify your asset all over in the organization, because I don't want to apply a lot of controls along a classification scheme that has been labeled public. So you need to classify all your assets. But confidential and restricted, people use that interchangeably. Some people will say that restricted is lower than confidential. Those two components are not prescriptive. So once you are able to do the labeling and also define your classification scheme, then you have a comprehensive view of how you need to achieve that control objective and also the aim that we outlined during the first slide. Once that has been done, we need to look at the threat that we need to protect our organization against. So in the next session, we will look at the outline that we'll be talking about. What we are going to talk about in session 2 is attack surfaces and vectors, implementation of controls, and redefining metrics for the controls that we've implemented. So, what is an attack surface? What is an attack vector? Relating it to what is happening currently in the world. Let's take the coronavirus. The coronavirus is a threat. Now, for the coronavirus to impact a person, that coronavirus needs what? A path. That path, we call it attack vectors. So WHO are telling us, WHO are telling us that the path for which the coronavirus can traverse to impact a person is the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So we call it what? Attack vectors. Now, for the coronavirus to have a huge impact on the person, we need to define something we call attack surface. So what is an attack surface? Relating it to currently what is happening. The attack surface is the sum of vulnerabilities. So when you take the person who are vulnerable for the when it comes to the coronavirus, WHO is telling us that the people that are vulnerable are people who have what? Underlying health conditions. Heart, lung, kidney disease, diabetes, weakened immune system. So those are the vulnerable people. So when you relate it when you relate it to the cybersecurity space, what we are saying is that the attack vectors, physical access, the path that an attacker can pass to attack your asset in your organization. So you need to put a control there. Also, phishing is an attack vector. By the way, these attack vectors are not exhaustive. There are many more. We have man-in-the-middle attacks, can be an attack vector. And also DDoS attack can be an attack vector. So right now, you know the attack vectors, you know the attack surfaces. So for you to build the resilient and trusted communication services, you need to put certain controls around the attack vectors. And also you need to reduce the attack surface. But we know that we cannot provide 100% security. So let's look at some of the controls that we need to put in place around that for us to have a resilient and trusted communication service. Using a layered approach, we have the perimeter security, we have the network security, we have the endpoint security, we have the application security, we have the data security. I don't want to talk more about the technical solutions, but my experience has taught me something building cybersecurity programs for companies. I've realized that people have the best security solutions that you can think of. But what they fail to roll out is something that I call incident management and response, and also disaster recovery. So you can have the best security solutions based on the activities that we went through. You've done your planning, you've put in all the necessary controls in place. But what they fail to do, what they fail to roll out is this, the operation side. You having something I call the SOC. Now, when I was explaining risk assessment, I said something. I said, you combining your effort so that you will be able to identify and analyze potential events. When it comes to incident management and response, our main goal is to manage unexpected events. Because you cannot provide 100% security, the threat can bypass all these technical solutions that you've rolled out. So you should have a way of detecting and managing that unexpected event, because you were able to detect those potential events during your risk assessment phase. So the incident management and response helps you to manage the unexpected events that bypass all the security controls that have been put in place. So let's look at some of the activities under incident response and management. Incident management and response, you need to have the detection activity outline. After detection, then you have recording. Once you record, then you do evaluation. the evaluation tells you that based on what I've recorded, is it an event or is it an incident? Based on your incident management policy, what you've classified as an incident or event. Once you've done your evaluation, then you go to the containment stage. You need to contain the incident. If you can, once you contain the incident, then you move to the eradication. You need to find out the origin of the incident. Then after the eradication, if you cannot eradicate that particular incident, then what you do is that you escalate it. After escalation, we have something called response. You trying to manage the unexpected event, incident, and also restoring the services as agreed in the SLA, security SLA. But this is where disaster recovery becomes so key. If you are not able, your incident response plan and management is not able to handle that particular incident, then it tends to be what? A full-blown disaster. So you have to activate what? Your disaster recovery. So let's imagine a ransomware attack. You did everything possible. You escalated it. You followed all the incident response steps, but you realized that you cannot restore those kind of services as defined in the SLA. So what will you do? You take up your backup and restore. This is what a lot of companies fail to do. Building the cybersecurity program for companies, they have all these nice gadgets. I call them nice to have, but they don't pay a lot of attention around the incident response and management and also the disaster recovery. So it's very important that as we do the implementation of the controls, having a layered approach, we need to pay particular attention to the SOC because they are the ones that do the investigatory and also the forensic analysis. And also don't forget your disaster recovery plan. Once that has been done, we'll move on to something that also key that a lot of people fail to define in their organization. Measurement and maturity. There's a saying by Peter Drucker. He said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So it's very key and it's very important that in the organization, we have measurement along these three enablers that helps us to achieve our strategic business objectives. I call them technology, process, and people. We use the CMM, capability maturity model. And for people that do not know the capability maturity model came into existence when in the 90s, when the Department of Defense wanted their software vendor, they wanted to validate the capability of their software vendor. So they wanted to validate the capability of the software vendor in developing a software on time and also according to budget. So what they did was that they engaged the Software Engineering Institute, and they came up with this nice model that a lot of people use it as guidelines to assess the capability and also the maturity in their organization. So when you look at this model, it's a fine model that also based on my experience in building cybersecurity programs, I realized that a lot of people focus their attention on the process side, but they don't pay particular attention on the people side because we want to have a 360 maturity in our organization so that we can minimize the risk in our organization. So all the focus is on the technology, but the processes and the people, they will meet that. So we have the people capability maturity model, we have the process capability maturity model, and we have the technology maturity model. Also, a lot of people analyzing and looking at an organization as a whole, a lot of people are at the defined maturity level, because still, though that we have controls in place, we are over-reliant on individual effort. People want to try to get to the automated and also continuous improvement. Some big organizations have, but it's not all organizations that do have that. So this maturity level, capability maturity level, is very, very key. For you to manage your control well, you should be able to measure it. It's very, very key. What is the takeaway from this particular slide? The takeaway from this particular slide is that you cannot know whether or not you are successful unless success is defined and tracked. For us to know whether we are successful, we need to define and track our success. And for you to be able to define the criteria, or for you to have a metric for those controls that you are implementing, I would advise that you look at ISO 27004. It comes with a nice metrics that you can use for your controls, and also it can address all the people enabler in your organization, the process enabler in your organization, and the technology enabler in your organization. My final thought: failing to do planning is planning to fail. It's imperative that we have to do planning. We need to plan for our control objective. It's key. A lot of people implement controls and they don't know the control objective for that particular control. Also, we need to plan for the implementation of our controls. We having a layered approach, but also we need to do a lot of planning around the SOC and also around the incident management and disaster recovery, because that is very, very key for us to build a resilient and trusted communication service. Incident response and disaster recovery is key. Plan for your SOC. And lastly, you need to plan the kind of metrics that will be associated with the controls that you've rolled out, so that you will know whether the controls that you've implemented are successful. Thank you. Please, if you have any question, you can type it in the chat. So I'll start with Derek Osaya Champon. What is the best framework to use when setting up a good security management system for a company? That's an interesting one. The key here is a good management system, and for a good management system, I always think about ISO 27001 because that is a management system. But once you do that, and once you roll out the ISO 27001, you can add some supplementary standards also to ensure that you are able to reduce the risk in your organization to an acceptable level. So the good management system when it comes to security is ISO 27001 because you are talking about management system. I hope I answered. Someone was asking whether we can get all this the slide. Yes, the team will send the slides to you. Yes, you are going to get the slide. So someone asking, can I list? Can I repeat the contents that we need to look out for when we are developing a policy? Of course, because that's very key. Any control that you roll out, you need to have a directive. I call it a directive. And in the directive, you need to have a deterrent control in place. That's the disciplinary statement that you put in there. But a lot of people do not know how to put those kind of content together. First of all, you need to have an introduction. You need to. So that's the first component that you need to put in place. The second component that you need to put in place is you need to have objectives, the objectives component. The third component that you need to put it in place is you need to have management commitment statements. Okay. If someone takes the policy, the person should see something coming from management that says that they take information security very seriously. Some people normally have it as a one-pager sitting somewhere, but you can add it to all your policies so that anyone who picks the policy, the person knows what the management is saying about that particular, what management is saying about security, the security posture in your organization. Then you need to have roles and responsibilities. Then you need to have the policy statement or policy requirement, and also you need to have a scope. Okay, so those are not exhaustive, but my experience after explaining this thing to people, people are able to design policy at ease, because what we've realized is that a lot of people just, when they want to write policy, they just copy it from the internet and paste it, but they don't have an idea about how to put those kind of policy documents together. So once you know this kind of framework, you should be able to write a policy. But we'll share the slides to you so you can have a look at it. I hope, Adote, I hope I answered your question. So someone is asking how often, from experience, how often does a company need to revise their risk management policy? It's a good question. First of all, I normally say that you can say every 6 months of every year, but from experience, I've realized that it doesn't hold. I'll explain to you why. Because when you look at the components of risk management, we have the last component in risk management and what we call the last component, monitoring and assurance. And for me to review my risk assessment or risk management, anytime something changes around the scope, I need to do a risk assessment or I need to review my risk assessment policy. So anytime something changes around the scope that I'm doing the risk assessment, I need to do a risk assessment. So you can have a risk assessment document today, and tomorrow something will change. That document that you have today has been signed, and you said that every year you review it. And all of a sudden, just tomorrow, something changes in the scope. You have to do a risk assessment and also review your risk assessment policy and document. Okay, so I mean, it's dicey. And we have the event component. The event component is whereby it says that, you know, I'll do, no matter if nothing changes, then I'll review it every 6 months or every year. So I'll advise that it should be every 6 months or every year, but not 2 years. I hope I answered your question. Someone asked, what is the duration of ISO 27000 training at Innovare, and when is the next session? Thank you. Okay, duration is 4 or 5 days, and something nice about Innovare is that because we are on the field, we've been rolling out ISO 27001 and cybersecurity and business continuity for a lot of organization. We have the experience. So when we come and when we are doing the training, we are not doing the theoretical stuff, but we give you the practical experience. So it normally takes 5 days for you to have the practical experience. So it's quite different from what others, the ISO training that people are doing, whereby they read a book, but they don't give you the practical hands-on. So it's 5 days. We hope that you choose Innovare, of course. Someone asked, so I think I escaped one. From experience, have most organizations classified, someone asked from experience, have most of an organization classified their data? You know, from experience, I would say that yes, they've classified their data, but they haven't labeled the data. So we have the classification. When you ask them, they'll say, okay, this is the classification scheme that we've implemented. That's on paper, but they haven't done the labeling. They haven't transferred what they've done on what they've done on the paper. They haven't transferred it practically. And when an auditor is auditing, you come into audit when you have something on paper, and I realize that you haven't done it. Of course, it's a major non-conformity. So from experience, yes, they've done the classification schemes, but they haven't done the labeling. I hope I answered your question. Challenge is from experience. I would say that competence is a major challenge for companies because they don't really understand the essence of classification. Because you go to senior management and you tell the managing director that, okay, I need to label critical asset in an organization, or you tell the CFO. I think the people that are managing the information security management system do not have the soft skills enough to communicate what the language that management needs to hear. So that's from experience. That's what I've experienced based on what I've been doing for people. So management do not see the need for the labeling of that. But if you're able to come from how I explain the classification and labeling, they'll really, really appreciate it that, okay, we have a public classification scheme and I've labeled the document as public. I don't need to put in all the necessary controls around that because it's public. People need to view it. So by doing that, you reduce I will say the OPEX and the CAPEX side of things. And management, security, CFO, when you start talking about reduction of the OPEX and CAPEX, they tend to listen to you, give an open ear to you. So I believe that those who are handling the management system needs to know what the recipient needs to hear and try to communicate around that line. I hope I answered your question. Okay. So any more questions? Someone is asking, do we have any form of GDPR in Ghana as adopted by EU, looking at how we are harassing inbox daily? Interesting question. You know, I will rephrase it. I need to change the question that you asked. You know, we rather adopted the GDPR. You know, there's California too has a law when it comes to privacy. Ghana picked their data protection act from the European Union. Yes, we have the Data Protection Act. And trust me, yes, you know, I would say that the Data Protection Authority need to have the right skills so that they can fully regulate this kind of organizations, because what you are saying is true. For you to seek PI information, from individual, you need to seek their consent. And also, I would say that we, the individuals too, we are not preaching about the Data Protection Act. That's the security practitioners. Because I feel like if someone is harassing me or doing something, and I haven't given my PI information, or I haven't even published my email address on the internet, my email address is confidential, and the person should get access to my email address, and the person should start sending spams to me, you can contact the Data Protection Authority. And once Data Protection Authority start penalizing people, people will take the data protection law in Ghana very seriously. But now, to me, it's not working, because when I'm auditing and building cybersecurity programs for companies, the moment I start asking data protection certificate, what I realize is that people can go and buy from the Data Protection Authority, but the Data Protection Authority does not ask certain questions, because in the Data Protection Act, we have two principles. We have the privacy principles and we have the security principles, and they don't really, I think that it boils down to competence and skills in that at that place. I hope I answered your question. Okay. So if there's no further question, I would like to tell you what kind of offer that Innovare is offering. So our offering, we are a consulting company. We build management system for organization, because the reason why management system has become so key for organization now is that we need to improve the security hygiene of Ghana, because Ghana's cyberspace is really porous. So we need to improve the cyberspace security hygiene of our country. Also, we do audit and assessment, and also we do a lot of trainings, information security and risk. But we are offering a special offer for today only. Tomorrow we'll be having training on introduction to information security management system with ISO 27001. The time is 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you want to learn more about ISO, the practical way of really understanding the management system, because I believe strongly that if you're able to get the management system right from ISO, you can implement all other management systems, because they follow the same pattern. So you need to get the practical understanding of implementing the management system. And tomorrow, we have an experienced instructor who will be taking us through how to roll out the management system for organization, the introduction aspect of it, and it's free. We would like to say a big thank you to all who joined today's webinar session, and we hope that today's webinar session has been very, very informative. Thank you very much.